Back in the day, no one thought twice about hopping into a car and hitting the road without a seatbelt. The kids? Sitting in the back of the station wagon. No straps, no car seats, just freedom and wind in their hair. In fact, some folks thought seatbelts were more dangerous than helpful. But today, not buckling up can get you pulled over, or worse. So how did we get here? This is the story of how one simple strap went from optional to life-saving law. And trust me, it wasn't an easy ride. If you grew up in the 50s, 60s, or even the early 70s, you probably remember how different driving used to be. Cars were massive, steel beasts with bench seats and no headrests. There were no airbags, no child seats, and seatbelts. If your car even had them, they were probably stuffed down in the seat cushions, never touched. Riding in the back of a pickup truck wasn't illegal, it was fun. Families would pile into the car, roll the windows down and hit the open road. No one worried much about safety. It was all about freedom, adventure, and the American highway. And advertisers didn't talk about seatbelts. They sold cars with phrases like rocket power, smooth ride, and room for the whole family. Safety just wasn't sexy. In fact, some people believed seatbelts could trap you in an accident, and they'd actually cut them out of their cars. It's hard to imagine today, but back then, personal responsibility mattered more than government rules. You made your own choices, and you lived with the consequences. But as the number of deadly crashes kept rising, car makers and lawmakers couldn't ignore the truth much longer. Something had to change.
Seatbelts didn't just show up one day, and they certainly weren't greeted with cheers. In the late 1950s, a Swedish engineer named Nils Bohlin, working for Volvo, created the first modern three-point seatbelt. The same design we still use today. It was simple, it was smart, and most importantly, it worked. By 1959, Volvo was installing them in every new car. Across the ocean in America, though, automakers weren't in a rush to copy. It took until 1964 for US federal law to require seatbelts in all new cars. But here's the catch. Drivers didn't have to wear them, and many didn't. Some cut the belts out entirely, others stuffed them under the seats. People complained they were uncomfortable, restrictive, even pointless. To some, seatbelts felt less like safety gear and more like the government stepping in where it didn't belong, chipping away at personal freedom. And in a country where freedom is part of the national DNA, that didn't go over well. But reality has a way of catching up, and soon the numbers told a story too powerful to ignore. By the 1970s, traffic deaths in the US were climbing fast, and Washington could no longer look the other way. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, rolled out study after study showing seatbelts could cut the risk of death in serious crashes by nearly 50%. The proof was everywhere. Survivors wore seatbelts, victims didn't. Simple as that. Hospitals knew it, paramedics saw it on the roadside, and families who lost loved ones in avoidable accidents, they felt it most. Public service campaigns hit the airwaves. Remember the jingle, "Buckle up for safety, buckle up"? Some states even dangled incentives, like insurance discounts for regular seatbelt users. But still, progress crawled. Many Americans, especially older drivers, clung to the same line. "I've been driving this way for 30 years and never needed one." The trouble was, the road had changed. Cars were faster, traffic thicker, distractions everywhere. At this point, the real debate wasn't if seatbelts saved lives. It was whether the government could tell you to wear one. By the early 1980s, one thing was obvious. Education alone wasn't enough. People knew seatbelts saved lives, but most still refused to wear them. So in 1984, New York took the leap, becoming the first US state to require drivers and front seat passengers to buckle up. It was a turning point, and it lit a firestorm. Protests erupted, radio hosts railed against government overreach, some even called it tyranny on wheels. But the law held, and within a few years, more than half the states followed suit. One state, though, stood its ground: New Hampshire. To this day, it's the only state where adults aren't required by law to wear a seatbelt. Their motto? Live free or die. That says it all. This fight was never just about safety. It was about freedom, a value woven deep into the American identity. Still, the numbers told a different story. States with seatbelt laws saw traffic deaths plunge, and slowly, even the staunchest skeptics began to buckle up. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That moment, when resistance turned into responsibility, marked the start of a new era in American driving. Fast forward to today, it's almost unthinkable to sit in a car without buckling up. Over 90% of Americans now click in every time they drive. Modern cars nag you with alarms that won't quit until the belt's on. Some even lock the doors until every passenger is secured. Nationwide campaigns like Click It or Ticket have etched the habit into the public's mind. For younger generations, buckling up isn't a choice, it's muscle memory. But for those who remember the old days, when freedom meant no straps, no dings, no rules, it's a stark reminder of how far we've come. Today's cars are smarter, safer, and far more regulated. Yet the road here wasn't paved just with technology. It was built on decades of research, tragedy, resistance, and cultural change. It took all that to turn a simple strip of fabric into a national standard. And while the tug-of-war between personal freedom and public safety still plays out in other debates, on this one, most Americans agree. Freedom matters. But so does making it home alive. Maybe you remember it. Riding in the back of a pickup with your siblings. No seatbelts, no helmets. Just the wind in your hair and your hands gripping tight. Or maybe you were the odd one out, the first in your family to say, "Hold on, I'm buckling up," while everyone else just laughed. However your story goes, one thing's for sure, we've come a long way. That's the thing about progress. It doesn't always feel right in the moment, but looking back, it often makes perfect sense. Now we want to hear from you. Were you there before seatbelt laws? What do you remember about riding in cars back then? Share your story in the comments. You might just spark someone else's memory too. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit like, subscribe for more nostalgic history, and above all, keep buckling up. Past or present, it's always worth the ride. Thanks for coming along.